Welcome to the Living Yoga Podcast. My name is Darren Main, and on this podcast, I like to talk to people who inspire me and teach me things I don't already know about yoga, mindfulness, and living an awesome life. And in this episode, I have a really inspiring yoga teacher. His name is Adam Spillman. He is a cancer survivor and a yoga teacher, and his story just really is, when I started to become aware of him, it really moved me because I think all of us have those times in our lives where we just get the rug pulled out from under us and it feels like there's no way out. And Adam is living proof that that is not the case. So I will put a link to Adam's website, adamspillman.com, in the show notes so you can click through and connect with him if you like. You can also drop comments and ask either of us questions or share your own personal experience on either YouTube or Spotify. And we're also on Instagram and Facebook if you want to check us out there. I will also put links to all of my work so you can connect with me as well. And we both hope to see you in a yoga class soon. With that, I'm going to bring in Adam and we're going to talk about his amazing story and how it could inspire the rest of us to overcome those really difficult patches in life. Adam, welcome.
Great to be here, Darren. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It's really it's really amazing to be chatting with you, and I'll tell you why I feel that way in a minute. But before I get to my own yapping about why I think you're so awesome, I would love for people who don't know you, who maybe haven't taken your class or seen some of your stuff online, or your story, maybe share just a little bit about your experience with cancer and yoga and overcoming and being the happy, healthy, amazing man you are today.
Amazing. Yeah. So, pre-cancer, just a little bit. What I did with my life, my work, was purely around whitewater kayaking. So, traveling into rivers, traveling around the world. It's just a daily venture. It's what I woke up and thought about each and every single moment of every day. And around 2018, I started also turning 30. I started experiencing just symptoms with my health. I was getting random skin infections on a almost bi-weekly basis, followed with fatigue, and everything was coming back to, oh, you have dirty kayaking gear, and the fatigue was being related to other things. And it was so much, oh, I guess this must be what turning 30 feels like. And I went to a few doctor's appointments. Shortly after that, everything was cleared. You're okay. And I went to Chile and to Patagonia and traveled down there for 3 months exploring rivers. It was a dream destination for me. And when I was down there, my health was just declining and got to the point when I got back from that trip, I could barely walk. But mentally, I just was staying away from the hospital because they had always told me I was fine. And finally, everything just broke down. And at 1 a.m. in a hospital emergency room, they finally did x-rays and CT scans. And it came back that I had 200 plus tumors in my abdomen, lungs, liver, kidney. And it was a very grim diagnosis at first. We don't know what this is. We know it's cancer. And that right there was probably one of the most beautiful moments of my life. And we can get back to that. And shortly after,
Interesting way to describe it.
it
We're
really is.
definitely coming
Yeah,
back to
it
that.
is. But we'll come back to that. I'm sure, just speaking of yoga and getting in touch with yourself and just the moment. And 48 hours living in this world of I've got tumors on my liver, my kidney, my lungs, and you go down the WebMD rabbit hole and it's 4% survival if it's spread. And obviously things had spread. And one morning I woke up and a doctor in Portland had found my blood work, and gave me probably the best news you could hear, which was you have stage 3C testicular cancer. It doesn't get any worse than this. However, if you can survive this treatment, this is curable. So right there was a glimmer of hope, a silver lining, and everything just kind of snowballed from there in a positive direction. It was very
Mm,
hard. There was a lot of moments where, I've experienced some near death and was in those spaces, but also made it through. And then I got the cure after a big surgery. And after that surgery, we went right into the lockdowns and COVID. So
wow.
that's really where my journey with breath work and yoga really started to unfold. And I started to really notice the power of it. It really helped me through battling cancer. But one of the more common things I hear from cancer survivors is post cancer is one of the hardest experiences, just grounding yourself back in reality, finding out who you are, living with that fear. Is it going to come back? And just, yeah, a changed perception, if you will. So,
Yeah. Well, there's so much I want to follow up on there.
yeah.
It sounds like the cancer started as testicular cancer and then metastasized to your liver and other organs,
Yep.
and they were able to, because once things metastasize, the I'm not an oncologist, but I know that that's not good.
Yeah, it's not.
What is your prognosis now? Are you in
So,
remission or?
completely cancer free. I just hit this last February of this year. 5 years cancer free. So I'm officially cured from cancer. The thing with testicular cancer is it's a very aggressive cancer. So it spreads quick, and its goal is to get from your testicle to your brain. And so it works its way up. And luckily, mine all hung out in my chest, like my arteries. I say luckily, but yeah, it all just kind of stayed there. And which
Mm,
was surprising. Like all my numbers, all the tumor markers, everything suggested that it had made its way into my brain, which is probably why I'm still here today. And
wow.
with that, you know, Eastern philosophy, Eastern medicines were definitely a big part of, alternative was a big part of, but I was very lucky in the sense that chemotherapy, um, this type of chemotherapy actually is very successful with my cancer. And so it
Yeah.
really became a game of everything that I did was in support of me surviving the chemo. And that was the game. And so my original
Yeah.
diagnosis was you have a week to live without treatment. And if we do this treatment, you have about a 30 to 40% chance of surviving the treatment itself. And so,
Surviving the treatment.
yeah, the treatment, it's chemotherapy is, I call it my medicine, but if you really start to look into it, it's some
Yeah.
very heavy stuff.
Um, One of the things that is interesting to me about your story is we tend to think of the person who gets cancer as the person who doesn't live very well. They smoke, they drink, they eat a bad diet, a bunch of things that put you at higher risk for cancer. But your life, I mean, whitewater rafting, you were clearly healthy, active,
Yeah.
um, living your best life. And I think that part of your story, for those of us who do try to live pretty well, is it's both inspiring and terrifying because it's like, yes, we can do all the right things. And cancer, yes, you increase your likelihood with lifestyle choices, but you know, this sort of we never know when something like this is going to happen in our lives. And um, I don't know if you have any thoughts about that,
I
but
do. I do. And yes. Yes. I would say I was healthy, active for sure. But the thing with kayaking and the thing with, who I was as a person, I have childhood issues. I have trauma I grew up with, just like us all. And I think my way of it wasn't processing, it was more of a distraction. Kayaking was an everyday thing, and it was always go, go, go. Where's the next river? Where's the next place? And almost a selfish pursuit, if you will. And yes,
mm,
I took care of myself. There was exercising, but I also partied a lot. I feel like there was this thing that I was maintaining this balance. And then, the first week I was in the hospital, we had a ton of people reach out to us. I was in for a week. My wife was there with me the entire time. And she's getting information. We're open-minded about everything. And the alternative stuff came in the form of nutrition. And so one of the things that I did was suggested to me from someone who survived cancer solely off of food and diet was this juicing regimen. And I ended up drinking every single day for 8 months, this 120 ounces of these raw juice concoctions every day. And I started to look and I started to see healthy, yes, but could I have been better? And my idea of my own personal health started to change, my choices, my decision making, all of that. And I do look back and I'm more so all of the things I would ignore up here and try to distract from in kayaking, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
it does. One quick question, and then I want to dive into something. I want to circle back to something you said about that was the best news I ever got, or something.
Yeah, we'll get
What most people would think the worst news you could possibly get, and you've sort of flipped that around. I want to hear about that, but I'm curious. Your doctors. Obviously, you did chemotherapy, so you didn't like say screw Western medicine. You went,
hmm
you got chemotherapy and did sort of what your doctors recommended. But you also complemented that with juicing and other things. Were your doctors, I mean, it's anecdotal, of course, it's just you. Uh, but were your doctors like, wow, this is the miracle guy? Or were they just like, yeah,
hmm
go juice, it's not going to hurt you, but it's really the chemo that did it?
Yeah, you just said it right there. It was, so my first week out of the hospital, so how they could tell my cancer was testicular cancer was you have these things called tumor markers. And one of mine was your HCG. And your HCG is a hormone that will show up in a woman when she's pregnant. And for a man, the number is never supposed to exceed the number 5. And when a woman's pregnant in peak pregnancy, that number may reach 200,000. And when they had my blood work, my number was 1 million. And so my doctor,
I don't know
Demish,
what 1 million means, but it sounds pretty
it means
awful.
so my doctor, she told me that 1 million basically meant I had the hormones of 3 pregnant women inside of me. And so
Hmm.
those were my symptoms too. Very emotional,
Was there
very
any chance you were pregnant?
definitely there could have been, but it didn't turn out that way. Pregnant with tumors and all that stuff, but yes. And then, so the first week after chemo, we started the juicing regimen right away. Started the health. It was all basically taken on an alkaline diet. And after 2 weeks of that, when I returned for my next 5 days in the hospital, we ran blood work. And that number that was 1 million was supposed to drop slowly over the next year, like maybe 100,000 if we're lucky every month. And when I returned back, it had already dropped about 800,000. So
Wow.
my disease had cut back like 80% or so, maybe 90%. I'm not the best with math, but it was a lot. And my doctors were shocked. We started talking to them about what we were doing, and it all came back to, well, we've never seen this before, but this is how good the chemo really is. And so those were the things. My doctors were always very supportive of everything that I was doing, but unfortunately, it just, there's a lot of rules around being able to talk about nutrition in the hospital. There's a lot of,
Yeah.
we can't really tell you to do this. We can't really say that that's medicine. It all falls back in their world onto liability. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it feels like uh, I do think that they're evidence-based, so they want to see studies that demonstrate that people who drink juice do better than people who don't drink juice
Oh,
with testicular
definitely.
cancer. That makes sense, but I feel like anecdotal evidence is a great way to form a hypothesis. Like, wow, here's this patient who did remarkably well, and one thing that he did differently was the juicing, and maybe we should look at 100 people, 50 that juice and 50 that don't, and see if there's any noticeable difference. Like, that's the researcher in my head going like, this is worth looking at. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's a coincidence, but maybe not.
Yeah,
So,
you and I think the same way on that one. That's definitely my thoughts.
so let's talk about why you have this crazy notion, and I mean crazy in the good way, that, and I want to preface this by saying I'm HIV positive long term from back when it was a scary thing and not a chronic thing. And I wrote an essay maybe a year after I tested positive called HIV, My Gift in Ugly Wrapping Paper. And it's one of the things that made me resonate with your story is that we tend to think of something like cancer or HIV or any number of other horribles that can happen in our life as just that horrible, bad luck, shitty luck, bad karma, whatever. I really believe that I am the man I am today, largely because of that diagnosis. I mean, so much changed for me. And from knowing a little bit about you and your story, and even that statement you made, like that was the best news you ever got. It says something about how you were able to transform your attitude or your beliefs or your frame, your narrative around that to something I think really healing. So I'm wondering if you could speak to that.
I can. And first off, I applaud you for your way you've taken a look at your challenge in life and how that showed up. And for me, the the year of my cancer was just such a I had other people telling me how I feel. Every time I went into the hospital, it was, no, you're fine. No, you're not feeling this way. I mean, even before I went to Chile, all these skin infections were showing up. And I had a friend who was like, I started reading about this and you should really look into it because common reoccurrences of skin infection can mean you have cancer or something showing up in your body. So I actually went before I had went for my 3 months travels and said, hey, can I get blood work? And they were just, no, you don't need it. You're young. Blood work's expensive, and you're fine. You're fine. You're young and you're healthy. And just the 3 weeks leading up before my diagnosis, especially the week before, I was dying. I had 100 tumors in me. My liver was failing. Everything was shutting down. My kidney had a tennis ball sized tumor in it. My back was hunched over. You wouldn't believe, I hadn't been to the hospital and diagnosed before, just everything I was going through. And in that moment, when the
Do you
doctor
mind if
came
I
and
ask how they missed it? I mean,
just
I know
pure,
doctors are not gods, but I mean, just like it seems like even the early symptoms you had were significant and worth a CT scan or something.
that's exactly it. And I mean, I have my ideas, sometimes I think it's a money thing. Other times I think it's, there's people in the hospital all the time who are, I've got this, I've got that. And, you know, basically it came down to once they actually did an x-ray and once they actually did a CT scan, there was no doubt. I mean, I was just full. When I look, I still have pictures of the scans. It's remarkable to see what was in there. And they were, oh, this explains a lot. That's basically how it happened. Finally, they just never ran tests. We never got to the blood work. We never did the CT scans until it was, this 30-year-old man is hunched over. He's obviously looks physically fit. He should not be like this. And once they did that, it was clear as day. We should have looked at this a long time ago. And it was, I mean, even when my doctor, I picked up the phone when my oncologist called to say, hey, you need to get in here for chemo. She couldn't believe I was on the phone. She was, you're talking to me right now. I've never seen somebody with these numbers and them be alive, let alone talking. So it was just,
Hmm.
I try to be really careful with how I talk about it because every hospital is different. I believe our doctors always trying to do good, but I also think there's an overwhelm in the healthcare system, and that was pre-COVID, and I can't imagine what it's like now. But I just think, there's a lot of, hey, I'm hurting, hey, I'm sick, and they see it all the time, and I just kind of fell in that bracket is how I look
Yeah.
at it. So, but yeah,
No, I was just gonna say, I'm still, I mean, I'm seeing it, but I would love to hear more about how. This all sounds like pretty bad news so far.
It is. Yeah.
Um,
It was
but good
just,
news in the end, but now in
yeah.
hindsight. But I mean, like,
Yeah. I mean, obviously, in that moment, when I say it was the best news of my life, I think that was an unfolding as things went on. I can tell you the exact moment my life changed, and it was when I heard those three words, "You have cancer." But when I heard those three words, this deeper sense of me came forward. And so I fell behind the veil. It was the first time in my life I not only could hear my heartbeat, but I could feel my blood moving through my body. I could feel every pore, the sweat pouring through. And there was this internal dialogue that left all thoughts. And it was almost like I was just being held with love. And this might have lasted. I mean, my wife knows, she said the second they told you that, you just stared forward. And
mm,
I remember the moment I came through, it's like the ego revealed itself again. And that's when all the suffering came back in. This is bad, this is messed up. I looked at my wife, immediately just apologized to her. I'm so sorry that this is happening to you, that I'm doing this to us. But that moment with myself, that moment when there was no thoughts, it was just me and my heartbeat, me and the processes of the body, this space of there's something deeper here beyond all of this. It sort of set the tone for the fear aspect was not as heavy. So, I was constantly facing life and death. It was very serious for so long. Every time I went in the hospital, there was a chance that the chemo could kill me. I had procedures where I wasn't allowed to be put under. I had to be awake for them. I had a really familiar relationship with pain, and it grew deep. And through all of it, I started to step into this person that was very proactive in my own healing. And that's kind of where it was like the best moment of my life. It put all
yeah,
responsibility on me. Maybe I couldn't, it's like the cancer. I personally believe that I'm responsible for it. I did something in my life that led me to that. I know that might sound wild for other people, and other people who hear this are like, your cancer diagnosis was beautiful for you, but for me, it was. And it was just like, okay, maybe I'm not responsible for this cancer, but I'm responsible for how I respond to this. This is
yeah,
whether I live or whether I transition from this life, it's all a part of the actions that I take now in this moment. And so
yeah.
yeah,
Uh, I was gonna ask, have you read the Bhagavad Gita?
I'm just starting to look into that. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So it's
It starts off with Arjun's despair, and what you're describing is that moment where you just everything breaks
yeah,
internally, externally. Like there's a war externally, and he's breaking on the inside. And then one of the first things Krishna teaches him is his mortality, that we have a body, it gets, childhood, middle age, old, dead, whatever. And you're attached to this, and what you're describing is such a beautiful lived experience of that, of letting the, the despair, the suffering, be reformed into this beautiful lesson, this beautiful opening in your life. It's really astounding.
thank you. Yeah. It's
Um, Go ahead.
I was just going to say it's really in relations to, there's so many teachings in yoga, even in Buddhism. I think Buddha said, he's got about 86,000 meditations, and that's because there's so many different people and everyone's different. And for me, my most yoga experience was that moment being told I had cancer. That was
Yeah.
one of the biggest teachings for me. And to me, that says something, you know?
I think one of the big problems with Western yoga is that we think it's all about feeling good. And it's great when it makes us feel good. I don't want to dismiss that. If you're having a stressful day or an ache or a pain in your body or whatever, and you roll out your mat and you feel better, that's great. We should love that. But for me, yoga is really about going headfirst into the suffering, the challenge, the struggle. Where do you hurt? Where are you afraid? And then finding something beautiful in there, because most people are afraid to look in those dark corners. But something like a cancer diagnosis, you either look or you die.
Mm-hmm.
You're not left with much of a choice. So, what advice do you have for listeners? Because, most people will not, hopefully, will not receive a cancer diagnosis, or maybe they will. But if it's not that, it'll be something else. We all have moments where the house of cards that is our life comes crumbling down, and we lose people we love, and the world falls apart, and stuff sort of sucks.
Yeah.
um and ultimately this is a temporary assignment, being in this body. So I'm wondering what advice you have as a yoga teacher, as a cancer survivor, as a human.
Yeah.
um
My first advice is, you're worth it. That's what I want everyone to know is you're worth it. You're worthy of love and being loved, and you're also worthy of loving others and loving yourself. And yes, not everyone will have a cancer diagnosis, and great. I'm really happy for that. But also, one thing that I learned being the person who had cancer and also having a friend who came over to my house one night to spend time with me, who that night he found out his, partner of 10 years was leaving him. And, I asked him, hey, what's wrong? Oh, I can't put this on you. Look at what you're going through. It's so much more than what I'm going through. And, that was a moment when I realized we have commonality here. You're suffering internally, I'm suffering internally. And on paper, it just looks different. And on paper, you can judge it and you can score it. You could say this is worse, that's worse. But the truth is it takes simply paying attention, simply slowing down, looking around and observing. And I personally believe that through our struggles or even something good that comes into your life, if you're there with it, that's where you're going to find the silver lining. That's where you're going to find the aha moment, that internal opening you up to that internal space that's always there. And I really do think that the reason my cancer was so impactful to me was just simply because I was paying attention the whole time. I was very open. People were, I didn't have a juice regimen before this, and I honestly would eat almost whatever I wanted most times. And I still would have like my berry smoothies in the morning and my green salads, but I would also be the guy who would eat 3 brownies, or something like that, just sugar and, not sleeping right and overworking my body and ignoring my pain from childhood and all of that stuff. And once I just started to allow myself to slow down, you really realize that the universe is working in your favor. It's always giving you
mm,
opportunities for growth, and growth hurts, growth's uncomfortable, and you really need to learn how to sit with the discomfort. And, asana is a perfect, perfect avenue for experiencing that. And meditation itself is it's very uncomfortable to just sit. Your body becomes uncomfortable, your mind becomes uncomfortable, and that's just one area to isolate that suffering so you can really observe. And sometimes
mhm,
in life, I think, try not to judge it so quick. This setback, this challenge, this thing that you have to overcome, where it feels like the light at the end of the tunnel is nowhere near. To be honest with you, if you told me you were in that situation, I would tell you you're on the right path. You're doing it right. Be there, be
mm,
with it. It doesn't always have to feel good. And as a matter of fact, it doesn't even have to feel bad. Like, that's a choice up here. And
mm,
life is a choice. Every moment of every day is a choice. And whether you are consciously making that choice or you're unconsciously making those actions, you're always making a choice. And I just think to me, my best advice is to slow down, to start listening, and to start observing more, and to just stay open-minded. I mean, being open-minded and consistent is what I truly believe helped me here. But I also think that if I did have to transition out of this life, it also helped me so that in that moment, in the hour of my death, I wasn't there with regrets. I was there to take it all in, surrounded by my loved ones and moving on. So that's my bit of advice.
Wow. um, Adam, you're it's very inspiring, and I was so excited to chat with you today. Um, I'm really excited to see the places your work as a yoga teacher goes, because I think there's a lot of yoga teachers who know their alignment, they know their sequencing, they know a few fancy Sanskrit words, but that's not the same as like going to the teacher training, yoga teacher training of cancer diagnosis. You know what I mean? Or anything like it. There's something to be said for applying yoga to the real shit, the hard shit, and then coming out the other side and being able to, you know, hold space for others who are. We're all doing that on a micro level or a macro level. So I'm super excited to see the amazing things you're going to do with the rest of your life that you've been given. Hopefully, it's a long one.
Hopefully.
Adam, adamspillman.com is your website. How can people who might want to connect with you, work with you, practice yoga with you, send you an email, whatever? What are the best ways for people to learn more about you, your work, and connect with you?
Perfect. Yeah. So adamspillman.com is a great way. Through there, you can access my email, and whether you want to work with me or whether you just have questions, or, I actually work with cancer patients for free. So if you just need some consultation, somebody to be there for you, somebody to talk to, don't hesitate to reach out. My email's on my website. You can also find me at Adam_Spillman on Instagram. So that's another way to get a hold of me and reach out. And then, yes, up here on the border of Oregon and Washington State is this beautiful little space in the world known as the Columbia River Gorge. It sits in between two volcanoes. One's in Oregon, one's in Washington. And there's this beautiful yoga
Is that where
studio.
Mount St. Helen is?
So Mount St. Helens is west of us. And so we have
Okay.
Mount Adams that is very north of us. It's like right there. And we have Mount Hood, which is just south of us. And so we just
Okay.
are nestled in between these two volcanoes. And we have this beautiful little yoga studio here known as Columbia Gorge Yoga or Yoga Samadhi. And I'm hosting classes there all the time, breathwork and meditation sessions, doing some things online from there. So if you're ever here, please join. And yeah, through my Instagram, you'll find out if I'm doing things online. And I'll actually be coming down to San Francisco quite a bit. So I don't know if I'll be teaching
Amazing.
down there, but our mutual friend Janet's been trying to get me to come down there, and I have a retreat in Napa Valley. So I'll be looking to check out some
Nice.
yoga studios down there and just practice and hang out. And yeah, things
Yeah.
are unfolding still. So
Well, if I can support you in finding some spaces down here to share your work with, and get the word out, if you do book something in the Bay Area, just let me know, because I definitely want people to check out your teaching.
amazing. Well, I love it. And I look forward to that. I will take you up on that.
Cool. Again, adamspillman.com is Adam's website. I'll put that in the show notes along with other resources we mentioned. If you would like to subscribe and follow, you can do that on Spotify. You can do that on YouTube. You can find some short reels on my Instagram feed. I love hearing from you. And if there's inspiring, amazing guests that are doing good work in the yoga, mindfulness, and wellness space that you think I should chat with, be sure to put them on my radar. We'll see you in the next episode.